Changes Family. I'm Clive, and tonight I'm going to be talking on grief and loss. I think that it's quite an important subject that I want to go through, in that there is a lot of grief from the family side and also loss from the addict side. And I'm going to be reading you a poem. So the poem is called Shattered. It says, my life left me while I went on breathing. Sorry, Brian, I think you jumped a slide there. Okay, my life left me while I went on breathing. I saw nothing around me while I went on seeing. I had no words while I went on talking. I showed no feelings while I suffered deep inside. It was the only way I thought I could survive. All my plans, all my hopes, all my time just stopped. It's quite a powerful poem, and when I do this presentation with addicts, all of them say it reminds them of themselves. And I think even loved ones, when you're going through the traumatic stuff of addiction with the family, it's the exact same thing. And I'm going to read it again now so that you can just get more of an understanding of it. My life left me while I went on breathing. I saw nothing around me while I went on seeing. I had no words while I went on talking. I showed no feelings while I suffered deep inside. It was the only way I thought I could survive. All my plans, all my hopes, all my time just stopped. Okay, so what we're going to look at today is what grief really is, okay? Grief, definition of grief is intense sorrow, especially caused by someone's death. Now, when we're looking at addicts, their primary drug was their best friend. Giving it up is like a death to them as well. And this is what we're trying to show them, that this is a grief. You know, they're going to go through the stages of grief. And it is intense sorrow at times. And it's also for the family, seeing your loved one diminish from the drug use is just seeing that destruction between, you know, within your eyes, it's going in your face, is like, I'm powerless. I can't do anything about this. I can't change it. Nothing. Thanks, Brian. So the feelings of grief by Dr. Alan Wolfert is that when you're grieving, you experience many thoughts and feelings. As strange as these emotions may seem, they are true expressions of where you are right now. Rather than denying them or being victimized by these feelings, we want to help the individual learn how to recognize and learn from them. Naming their feelings and acknowledging them are the first steps to dealing with them. It's actually the process of becoming familiar with their feelings that will help them heal. Also, keep in mind that feelings are not good or bad. They just are. If you feel a feeling as they grieve, they simply means that you need to explore it and find a healthy way to express it. Now, an important thing in addiction, that a lot of the feelings that an addict had was that they numbed everything. They didn't want to deal with the feeling. Even when they come into treatment, you know, every group, we ask them how they're feeling. We want them to try and get in touch with what they're actually feeling at that moment. I think that we often had the addict's feelings are rage, anger, or none, you know, and there we're starting to get them to know that feelings are okay. It's not the way you react to them, it's the way you respond to them. Okay. Some of the feelings related with grief. It's a natural response to loss. It's an emotional suffering you will feel when something or someone you loved is taken away. Often the pains of loss can feel overwhelming. You may experience all kinds of difficult and unexpected emotions. Some of the examples of these emotions are sorrow, misery, profound sadness, anguish, distress, agony, torment, suffering, heartache, heartbreak, regret, shame, shock, anger, disbelief, numbness, resentment, and guilt. Grief and loss come from various situations, and I'm going to give you some examples, but our specific one that we're saying, our primary is here, the loss of the drugs, and also for the family, seeing the loved one actually losing themselves within their addiction. So these are some of the grief and losses that come through various situations. Death of a loved one, the realization that you have a disease. This is important even in addiction, when the addict realizes that it's a disease, when the family realizes it's a disease. Divorce or breakup, losing a job, loss of financial instability, a miscarriage, death of a pet, loss of a cherished dream, a loved one's diagnosis of a serious illness, loss of a friendship, loss of safety after trauma, and moving to a new house, school, or city. Whatever the loss is, it's personal to you, so don't deny how you feel. And this is what's important, really is very personal to you. So the first discovery of stages in grief was done by a Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was working in a hospital, and she saw that what they were doing in hospitals, when patients were dying, they put them aside and nobody dealt with them. And she started to actually go talk to them and find out and help them through this grief process of dying. And she's written quite a few books, and the one book is Death and Die. And she has a quote, "Grief must be witnessed to be healed," by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Okay. So the first stage of grief is what we call the denial. This is what is happening, An individual may refuse to accept that the loss has occurred. They may minimize or outright deny the situation. This is often temporary way to deal with the rush of overwhelming emotions, and this is very common in addiction. You get the lying, you get the dishonesty, and this is something we work with throughout our primary care program for the 20
Nice.
days.
You see what it does, love?
Sorry? So this is often what we work with in primary for the first 20 odd days that we have your loved ones with us, is to show them where their denial is, to show them what's happening, how they're in denial. And this is often done a lot in the way they work within groups, in the group experience. We try to show them, and it's like the denial, it can be quite thick. We also find that often addiction, the loved one lives with delusion, believing that it's not as bad. And this is why we often ask for our collateral letters and when we have a family session, because they need to hear it from you, the loved one, how it's affected you and what their behavior has caused, And there's a lot of denial, a lot of minimizing, and a lot of not wanting to face exactly what has happened. This is a first stage, and through the process of death and dying, it's a situation where they will go from denial, and they might go between the different stages at different times. And it will become a thing that we need to look at. Denial is in 5 easy steps: is to see the evidence, ignore your intuition, swallow your emotions, reason away the evidence, and pretends all well. And that happens in the family as well. These 5 steps are very, very common. You see something, you don't want to believe it. Your gut is saying something to you, and you don't want to trust it, and you swallow your emotions because you're too scared to challenge at times. You reason away the evidence. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe it didn't happen, and then you pretend this all is well. This is how the stages go through, and these are the very common 5 stages of denial. The second stage that the process that is going through, because it is 5 stages, is the stage of anger. Anger is, why is this happening to me? As reality sets in, they face with the pain of their loss. They may feel frustrated, helpless, and these feelings later turn into anger. And we have 2 types of anger that we want to show you. Is the external, which is the rage, the outbursts, etc., and the internal, which is the embarrassment, the fear, the unsure, the stress, the shame, the guilt, the helplessness, the anxiety, and a lot of fear. Okay, that's in the internal. So we look at that as the anger iceberg, because often when we have those explosions, underneath that is a lot of fear, a lot of low self-worth, low self-acceptance as well, and rejection. Now, often what happens here, they might direct their anger towards the other people, their loved ones, higher power, life in general, and they can even start to blame in the situation of anger. They will try and find something, and to be angry with a loved one is very common at this stage. It really is. Now, when we're going through these stages, people just don't go through them from denial to anger, and so forth. They will often come into anger and they'll move back to denial. Then they'll come back to anger again. And then our third stage, which is called bargaining, okay? I will do anything to change this. In the bargaining stage, the individual may try to change or delay their loss. And we often find this happening. It's like, the problem's only a specific drug. I can still use that drug. It was only spirits. I can still use beer and wine. They often bargain that the problem was just a particular drug or a particular person, or if my father, my mother, my loved one just left me alone, then I'd be okay. And bargaining often comes in a situation where they will start to beg you to try, take me back. I promise you it will be better now. I know what to do. I know this illness. I've been in treatment, 2 weeks. I've got it. I want to come home. I want to come home. And they try to convince their partners and loved ones, often even to return after a breakup. They make promises. They bargain that it was only one specific drug is the problem, or that. They search for unlikely cures in the case of a terminal illness. So they will try and really go deeper into this can't be happening, and I will do anything to change this. They might also try to strike deals with family members and higher power. And this is often when families tend to let the boundaries shift and believe that, you know, they've been in treatment, they're sounding better. Yes, maybe now they'll get it. And it often is a dangerous, dangerous stage. And they can go from bargaining, and when you put boundaries in again and say, no, get back to the anger, go back into the denial. So the stages will go back and forwards as we see them going through it. And how long it will take, we can't tell. Each individual is specific, and we can't say how long it will take. The third stage that we do come to, and this is the depression. What's the point on going on after all this? Now, depression in addiction, this is the dangerous stage. We often call that, we term it the pink cloud disappears, okay? This is the stage of, well, I'm doing everything to get myself right, and I'm just feeling in a dark place, and maybe going back to the drugs will be better. So the stage of depression, you find that the individual has come to recognize that a loss has occurred or will occur. Sadness sits in the person, and they begin to understand the loss and its effects on their lives. This is often when they start to see the consequences of their lives as well. The individual may isolate themselves and spend time crying and grieving. Issues and a decreased appetite can also occur in this. They may feel overwhelmed, regretful, and lonely. We often say when they're going through the stage, it is so important that they connect with the 5-step, with the fellowship, and go work their 5 pillars really well, because it's a normal stage. It's a normal acceptance of, they often say it's like, I can never use again. You know, I can't believe it. I won't be able to do that again. And in the 12-step fellowship, we say, just for today, just keep it for today. You know, don't rush it, just keep it for today. We try and give them hope that, yes, we're going to go through the depression. Even in the depression, they can go back to bargaining, back to anger, and back to denial. It all depends on the particular individual. The 5th and final stage that we often get to is, it's going to be okay. I know what is happening, and it can be changed. And we often say everything is going to be okay. To be all right, it may not be today, but eventually. And I love that saying, you know, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not the end, it's not okay. You know, this is often the final stage of grief. The individual comes to accept the reality and their loss. And I think that often here they actually come to accept their disease as a disease as well. You know, they understand the situation, and they come to terms emotionally with it. Although this may still feel sad, they are able to start moving forward in their lives, you know. So at the acceptance, they can start moving forward, you know. We also find that they can get to acceptance and something traumatic can happen, and they go back to denial again. Something can trigger them, you know, and we often say to the addicts, stay away from people, places, and things, because those triggers will take them back into the first 4 stages as well, and get them back into the acceptance again. So in the next slide, okay, but what I really want to talk about here, and what I've been trying to emphasize, is every person goes through these stages in their own way and their own time. You know, I think that a big thing that we really look at is that, and I want to emphasize, is feelings aren't good or bad. The addict fears their emotions, fears their feeling. They know how they can have outbursts. They hate themselves for that outburst. And what we try and tell them is that anger is a normal emotion. It's how you respond to it versus reacting to it is an okay way. And this is what we want to deal with, help them deal with, is how to deal with those fearful emotions that they don't know how to deal with. Pain, anger, the grief, all this stuff that they are petrified to look at. They may go backwards and forwards between the stages, or skip one or more stages altogether. The reminders of the loss of, like an anniversary or a familiar song, can trigger the return of grief. Okay, and this passes easily if it's dealt with through healthy processes. And I think that that's what we try and do in our work with addicts and with family, is that it does take time. It's not going to happen overnight. I think that it's even for families, when you start to see your loved ones getting better, it's like, is this too good to be true? Can I let my guard down? Is this going to be real? And if we have a disease, there is a disease of relapse, and we want to try and help, addicts deal with the emotions and deal with not masking it with drugs, alcohol, or other addictive behaviors. Those are the things that we really look at. As soon as we start to see, and when we look at addiction, the addiction from the drugs and alcohol, are easy to stop. It's what we call the process addictions that come in afterwards, and that is, excessive exercise, undereating, overeating, gymming, body dysmorphia, shopping, gaming. The list goes on and on. It's like, and this is where we are trying to show them that, like, it's not from an external, it's once they start to feel good inside, they don't have to have that external gratification, because that's what we find, is that internal gratification. With addicts, it's I want it and I want it now. And we hope to help them, come to terms with it through their process and through their 12 steps. A lot of them actually work through this in their 12 steps. They start to see where they come. And the 12 steps are not only for the addict, the 12 steps are there for the family as well, and we encourage you to actually look at them, in a way as well. I think that's all I have to say on the grief and loss. I don't know, Brian, from your side, if there's anything you would like to add, or anyone else.
Yeah, thank you, Clive, for that amazing share. And I think a lot of our loved ones, when they come into treatment, they will go through this process of grief. Usually clients will ask me, I thought by stopping drugs, my life would become much more easy. Unfortunately, that's not how it is. When you come into recovery, one of the biggest tasks, and I think, Clive, you highlighted that quite efficiently, is I have to start learning how to feel, and I have to learn how to behave accordingly or better than how I feel. If I'm so used to acting out because I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling depressed, or I need to feel the feeling and then do better than I'm feeling. And that's appropriate action based on regardless of how I'm feeling, because that's life, and eventually our loved ones, they will lose jobs, they will lose relationships, and they'll go through these stages, but they will not have to numb what they're feeling because of the actual experience that they're going through. And I think it's how you maintain recovery, honestly. If you can learn how to feel your feelings and then, do better or deal with the feelings rather than hiding away from them. I think that's the biggest aspect of recovery. And I appreciate your sharing with us today. We are open for questions. If you have any questions, if you have anything you want to add, please maybe just raise your hand using the emoji, or you can post it in the chat box. but we're open for any supplements. And if you want to add something, if something